I want to be known for the founder that advocates for lifestyle over revenue.
Hey, Melissa, great to have you on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. Hey, can you take us through your career journey? Tell us a little bit about how you got into tech to begin with.
Yeah, so the last job that I quit was at SAP, where I was one of their inside sales in Vancouver. And I just wanted to start my own business. I didn't really think that I wanted a tech startup. I just wanted to start a company. Actually, one of my first ideas was like an events-based platform, like a Craigslist for events, basically.
Yeah.
That obviously didn't go anywhere, but I just wanted a business and it happened to be on the internet. And at the time, like there wasn't Y Combinator or all those things, right? I think all those things got popular like around the time that I quit my job. And there were just like meetups. So I just would go to these meetups and meet up with other founders and entrepreneurs that were like trying to do stuff. And I guess it was just accidental. I hired a contractor at the
Yeah.
time who were to become my co-founder a couple of years later, but I hired a contractor to work on different projects. And that was just the beginning. So that was like 13 years ago.
And then now you're running eWebinar. So what was the founding moment of eWebinar?
Yeah, I started eWebinar, I think 2 months after my last business was acquired in 2019. And to give some context, we automate live webinars. We turn any video into an automated webinar that you could put on a recurring schedule. Imagine all the demos, onboarding, trainings that you're doing live right now. We automate all those with a video and delivers an engaging two-way participatory experience. You can do hundreds of webinars and demos every single month without actually being in front of a camera. So this was a problem that I personally lived with in my previous startup, which I ran for 5 years. I was the one that was doing all the demos, all the onboardings, all the trainings for new customers that we would sign up just to make sure they adopt the software, make sure that we can retain them. And at that time, I was also already digital nomading. So I was also doing these live webinars on opposite time zones. So I always thought there was a better way to do them because every single one of them were exactly the same. They were just for different customers and different companies. So after that company was acquired, this was just a problem that just kept coming back to me. So I was always searching for a solution that would solve that particular problem. And while there were solutions that were out there, they were just never built to the extent that I had imagined. Right. So after that company was acquired, I decided to solve this particular problem once and for all. And that was the beginning of eWebinar.
So did you spin up like a whole new development team? Or are you still working with the original co-founder you worked with? Like, how have you gone about building these successful companies one after the other?
They were not successful from the beginning. So there was always it was always a coin toss as to whether it would go somewhere. But the company that acquired mine absorbed the whole team. And it was actually not the right team to work on this particular product. So I actually hired a dev shop out of my previous company to build this in kind of the version 1 of eWebinar. We spent about a year on that project. That dev shop did not really work out. I think we both underestimated how big of a project it would be. So my life partner, who at the time was a fractional CTO for other companies, he started helping out on this project just to get it up and running. And as he was helping out, the product started working. So it started taking shape. I had been with him at that point for 5 or 6 years, and I didn't realize he could code this well. So I made an offer. It didn't make sense for me to continue with that dev shop at the time because we just weren't going anywhere. I decided to end that relationship and bring David in as a CTO co-founder. So at that time, I just made an offer for him to stop being fractional CTO for other companies and work more on eWebinar. And so we just worked out an agreement that works for both of us.
And that's a cool story because I think a lot of people who are founders go through that. You hire a dev shop and it doesn't always work out perfectly, but you get close enough that you're only a couple of pieces off really turning into the product you want. You've managed to successfully do that, which I think will be inspiring for a lot of people listening because it can be difficult when you hire a dev shop to then make it your own product and continue that journey and drive it forward if things aren't going perfectly when you work.
I think it would be nice if we were just a couple of pieces off, but we weren't.
That's probably even better for people to hear.
Yeah, I think dev shops are great for certain things, especially if you have a CTO in-house, which I did not. So I think that was the crux of the problem. And I'm not a technology person, like I'm more on the business side. So I didn't really know what they were doing and how to critique what they were doing. But I think dev shops are great at working on existing products and maybe pieces of existing products and certain features and maybe taking a product from 1 to 2, but definitely not from 0 to 1. And that doesn't just go for dev shops. I think that goes for all agencies. We've worked with a lot of marketing agencies that we've just spent so much money on, and not just for this business. Over my last 3 businesses, I worked with different marketing agencies that just have no idea how to take something from 0 to 1, coming up with the first marketing language and then iterating on the first thing. A lot of people are good at making something existing better, right? So that's definitely something to think about, I think, for people that are either working with dev shops that are not working out or about to hire one. Like, you need to know that it's probably not going to work out if you have nothing for them to work on right now.
Yeah.
That's a really good advice, right? Because that's probably one of the first things we get asked. Like, when do you decide when having an in-house team versus external team? Obviously, budget and capital play such a big part. But you're a firm believer of bootstrapping businesses, Melissa. So how do you make the decision?
Number one is we are very profit driven, right? And that's not to be confused with being revenue driven, right? You can have high revenue, but if you have higher costs, you're still negative profit. So we have to be very cautious about what we spend. And that's not to be confused with being cheap. We are not cheap. We spend what is required to get the return, to get the highest return on dollar. That's what we focus on. So we spend as much as we can to get the highest return for that dollar. And sometimes it's hiring people for fractional amounts of their time. But most of the time, we only hire contractors, right? We only deal with contractors. We do not have any employees. What that means is we hire dev shops in countries that we can afford. So we can't work with anybody in North America, Europe, probably not New Zealand or Australia, right? Like, we have to hire people. So our majority of our development team is in Vietnam. And then we work with a Norwegian dev shop that hires directly from Ukraine. So they have a Ukraine office. Within these countries, we can not just afford to pay market rate, we can also afford to pay a bonus, right, at the end of the year. But because we have a CTO in-house who is my life partner, financially, like, he's also a contractor because he's not based in Canada, right? So our company's based in Canada. We can only bootstrap and exist as a company because we can hire contractors and hire based on talent and passion and skill set, and not based on location, which I actually don't really believe. I don't believe that you should hire someone just because they are in the location where your company is based. And I think a lot of VC-backed companies would have to hire locally because their VCs might require them to be local and not be remote. Everybody on our team is remote, right? Some people are even digital nomads like myself, right? Yeah, so I think bootstrapping is only made possible because we can hire contractors and things like that. So that's how I think about it, is number one, because we have to be profit driven. We have to be very cautious about cost. And a big part of that is being able to hire people remotely anywhere, whether they are full-time or whether they are fractional. So all of our writers, for example, are like fractional. We don't need writers full-time. And the thing is, when you are able to hire someone for their fractional expertise, they are also able to maximize their time by working with multiple clients that are able to pay them more on specifically their expertise. So actually, in that model, everybody wins.
It's a win-win model. A lot of people listening to what you just said, Melissa, especially in this part of the world, will go risk, right? Because for them, if they can't see it, touch it, feel it, all of a sudden, it's just your product for your own environment. So therefore, can you tell us a little bit about the experience you've had and the output you've had from these teams? Because as you highlighted, fractional works for you. But for a lot of people out here, they'll just say, hey, this person or this dev shop doesn't have skin in the game. I'm going to just pay them. If the quality of work is not there, I'm out of cash anyway. I've had to pay them and off you go. Like, we end up in a bad relationship. But you seem to have not had that experience. So what's been like, How do you pick these places? How do you sort the individuals? Like, I'm asking a bunch of questions all at once. Sorry about it. But what's your thought process behind it?
Yeah, so we only work through referrals. Anyone who's on LinkedIn will get like 10 different marketing messages a day from dev shops saying they have the best developers in the world. If only that were true. Developers are probably the hardest. Actually, no, I think writers are actually the hardest people to hire for. Developers are probably the second. But if only that were true, that everybody's housing the best developers in the world, right? That would be very easy. So we only hire through referrals. And actually, before we started working with a dev shop in Vietnam, we actually went to Vietnam and met with, I think, 5 different dev shops and recruiters that people I know have worked with. And the reason we picked Vietnam is because we know that they have, at least I've heard that they have good work culture and all those things. And the population is actually fairly young and they're hardworking, which is all true. But we also love Vietnam. So we were actually looking for more reasons to go back. And actually, that was like pre-2020. So we went there like December of 2019 because we knew that eventually we would hire a team in Vietnam. So we actually met with people face to face. We got to see their office. We got to see their team. We got to, and also like when you meet somebody face to face, that really changes that relationship. And of course, we were starting brand new as well. So I think that was pretty important. And we had intention to grow a team there, not just hire 1 or 2 people. We wanted to grow our entire team there. And then the other thing is, it wasn't really that easy. And the reason why we work with a dev shop, especially for developers, and we don't for designers and writers and things like that, is because developers, even though we hire them remote, they are local with their shop. So they have an office to go to. So we know that for developers, that's actually very important, unless you're senior, right? So if you're senior, you might have other things that drive you, right? You might have a family that you want to spend more time with, so you're self-motivated and you already know how to do the work that you're given. But if you're not that senior and there's nothing else driving you, you want to go to an office, you want to exchange ideas, you want to learn through osmosis. And we know that's important for developers. And that's why we only work with dev shops that have local environments for our company. Because locally, they also have PMs that understand the local culture. So a lot of the developers we work with, they know English, they know how to write English, but they don't speak English very well. So there is actually a local PM that does a lot of the translations and also is like eyes and ears on the ground, because culturally, they don't really speak up. It's not like the West where you have an idea and you speak up, or you're not happy with something, you speak up. So in those cultures, they're like, and I know that because I'm Asian, they're encouraged to not speak up. So you actually need somebody local that understands a culture, that spends time with them to communicate things to us in that kind of work environment. So we can actually build a closer relationship with a team, ironically, through somebody else that's actually communicating for them. The other thing that's important is, in the beginning, a lot of developers don't actually work out. And it might not be a skill set problem. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's just a work culture problem, right? And if you're working through a dev shop, someone else can switch that person for you. And also, you don't have to have that awkward conversation and say, hey, Sean's not working out for us, right? Someone else is going to have that conversation, right? And
we have that all the time.
So the reason why I wanted to work with contractors is because I know through 10 years of building companies that I am really bad at managing people and having those emotional conversations. I don't like having those conversations. It's amazing to go through someone else to have those conversations. And I think when you're looking for the right developers on your team, in the beginning, we probably work through, I want to say like for every one person, we probably work through 1 to 3 people. And so now we have a team of 5 in Vietnam that have been on our project for anywhere from 2 to 3 years, but we have worked through many people to find those people. We just didn't have to do the recruiting ourselves. And so while it looks like, oh, it's been pretty easy for us, it really hasn't. We just got lucky to find a dev shop that's willing to have those conversations and willing to switch people out for us. But also we do have a CTO on our side to work with another lead on the other side. Unless you have a lead like a technology lead that helps you do that, I don't recommend that model, because you're
So
going
you're
to end up
getting,
where I did, right?
yeah,
With a dev
Yeah.
shop that I just couldn't work with because I couldn't, like, I wasn't coding and I didn't really know what they were doing directly.
so he's your quality control, right? He's making sure
Yeah.
the code you are getting is what you need, is scalable.
He also codes
It's going to
himself.
work. And he codes himself.
Yeah.
Right? So like you said, it's not them building from 0 to 1, right? He's building a bunch of that 0 to, so
Yeah.
they're working on top of.
Yeah. The thing is, you also have to understand when you're working with these countries, like a senior person in Vietnam is not a senior person in the US,
Sure.
but it's who you can afford,
Mm.
right? So you're constantly, as a bootstrap startup, making concessions on skill sets. But like I mentioned, it's the highest return on dollar that we can get. So we're paying $16,500 for 5 full-time people who codes, plus a full-time quality control, manual quality control, plus some fractional time from CTOs on their side to do things that are more complicated. So that's one person in the US.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yes, we're not getting the brain of that one person, and we're definitely not getting the productivity of that one person, but the amount of code that we're getting and the amount of things that we're getting done is still net positive. And that team of people are doing a lot of things that the super senior person is not willing to do.
Mm.
And
So
you're still
Getting
getting
that
brains.
continuity too,
Yeah.
right? Because of the effort that you're putting into them.
Yeah, we're also constantly frustrated, right? That we can't hire someone that is David's peer, right? There's a lot of risk, right? When you're
It's one person.
working with someone where one person knows everything. One thing goes down, David knows exactly where it is. And it's super frustrating to not have that person, but we don't have the luxury to hire that person yet. And we actually don't even know where to find them, right? So we started hiring from a development shop in Ukraine because the senior people there are actually quite senior, but it's still not to that level. It's a lot better than Vietnam and they can stand on their own, but it's not to that level. And until we have disposable income to attract someone and say pay like $20,000 a month for that person.
For a person.
And even then, right, what do you have to give to hire that person? Does that person need equity? Like, we don't give away equity, right? So, yeah, we haven't gotten there yet, but we hope that one day we could hire someone to actually take some things off of David's plate.
Well, again, as you bootstrap your business, they're all the decisions you make, right? As the power of bootstrapping is you're making money. So you get to choose how you're going to spend the money you're making in order to continue to grow your business. And every dollar is a choice. And so where the most pressing part of your business is at the time, is it scale and growth? Is it defensibility for tech? Is it giving you a weekend because you haven't had one in 3 years? And so you're going to put someone who can do that. Like, they're all the decisions you get to make as you using your own money to drive the business rather than going and raising funds to do so.
And I think the other concession that like doesn't really get talked about is, okay, because for every dollar we make, we pay it out. None of us, there's David and I who are the co-founders, and then there's my COO, who's really the third co-founder. Like, he's not that title, but he's really the third co-founder. He was the person that started helping me way before David. He was the first person I called, right? So he's jack of all trades, marketing guy, product manager. He writes all of our content. Like, the business doesn't work without that guy.
Yeah.
None of us is getting market salaries.
Yeah.
So the thing is, okay, if we make another 20 grand today, do we go and hire this person that can actually help David out? Or, hey, it's been 4 years since we started this business. Do we divide that 20K between the three of us so we can take care of ourselves and feel better running this business? Because we have real expenses. Like, David and Todd are in their 50s. They have real expenses, right? So do we hire a person to help the business, or do we just finally, after 4 years, take care of ourselves and make sure we have market salaries so we can keep going? This is also another concession that like now is becoming more and more, I guess, more and more obvious that, hey, maybe we should actually start to divide the profits every month towards our own pay instead of paying it out, because what's the cost of you feeling the exhaustion of not getting paid a market salary or living well like your peers, right?
Yep.
That's actually I think that's a fairly major thing, especially as you get older, is like, hey, I'm not living the same quality of life as my peers.
And it's balancing that with living the lifestyle you want to live and having the ability to live it because you've got time in your day in which to do it. So that's the challenge as a founder you're always balancing, isn't it? Like adding a body that's going to help take some time off, but also splitting that money between all of you so you can live an actual lifestyle that you've earned.
There's only so much delayed gratification that you can handle.
True.
You always say, oh, I can do this later. I can do this later. But it's okay. Is it 2 years? Is it 4 years? Is it 6 years? What is it?
Yeah. Because, you're right. Like social media has glamorized. I think a lot of people just hear about WhatsApp and everything else, and that's what think they're going to get 3 years in. I'll get billions of dollars. I'll never have to work again, and I'll feed back into the community. The reality is somewhat different, which most people often don't speak about. But Melissa, you have been great and prolific LinkedIn writer. So just want to touch on that subject. At what point in your journey did you think LinkedIn platform was something of value to you, and having a voice on there was going to just shine a light on someone else's life? Because I think like all the knowledge that we're now discussing or talking about, most often it's just hidden. People don't like to go talk about that. So what was your founding moment of that?
Yeah, it was when I ran out of leads.
Nice.
So I spent 10 years in my 2 previous startups running like sales-led companies. So I sold enterprise, like even
Yeah.
way before I started companies. Like I'm a salesperson. So BD and sales is like where all my jobs were. And I sold one-on-one through the enterprise. And SAP was like my last job. And so I only knew how to sell one-on-one. And coming to eWebinar, I actively, purposely did not want a company that required me to sell one-on-one. That's how eWebinar was born. But in my previous life, I spent lots of time at conferences, booths, doing one-on-one demos, nurturing customers, long sales cycles, right? Like big deals, but I was tied to that deal, right? Everybody wants to sell upmarket. Nobody thinks about the pain that comes with upmarket, right? Like customer texts you, they make up 15% of your revenue every year. You're going to have to respond to them, right? They want a custom feature. You're going to have to consider that. And then before you know it, you're managing like 15 versions of the product. This was my previous life. So I did not like that life. And I wanted, coming to this life, a product that could be sold 100% through the internet. I only want to chat support, email support. Like I did not want to go to any more conferences, take any more sales calls, like none of that. And a lot of that is determined through the price point of your product. I wanted a low cost product like a MailChimp. So everybody signs up on their own and they can convert on their own. But like naively, I didn't realize that was a whole different business. So I didn't realize that a product-led company would be 100 times harder than a sales-led company. Because sales-led company, you close one deal, you get like 10 grand or 100 grand for the year. And in my previous company, we only had 100 customers before we were sold. I thought that I could sell eWebinar one-on-one. But the thing is, when we started, it was like a $49 product, and now it's a $99 product. What I didn't know was people don't pick up the phone for that price point. Like that's just not how they buy. And then you realize after so many sales calls that making a call for $100 is a soul crushing activity. Because the thing is, it's not, oh, it's $100, they're going to buy right away. The sales cycle is exactly the same. They're going to have to think about it. They're going to have to talk to their boss, right? So you're not training that customer to do the discovery on their own when you're picking up the phone for a $100 product. So I realized that very quickly. Of course, I think founder-led sales is super important. It's how we got, I would say, our first 100 customers, right? But you're going to run out of people pretty quickly, right? Because for $100, you don't want to talk to that person again, right? For $10,000, you're going to want to nurture that lead. There's a reason to nurture that lead, right? But most importantly, picking up the phone is not how a person, like a software buyer, buys a low-cost product. So they're just not going to care about that, right? We tried cold outreach, buying email lists, doing email outreach. I probably tried that for a solid year. So our company, our product's really only been live for 3 years. right? Like maybe closer to 3.5 years. So about a year and a half into that, I ran out of leads. So I'm like, okay, where else do I go? Like cold outreach isn't working. Email isn't working. LinkedIn outreach isn't working. Referrals isn't really working. We tried like affiliate programs and things like that. We just didn't have the brand, right? So people were like, who are you? And so I started just looking on LinkedIn and Twitter to see what companies that I like that in my kind of price point were doing and what companies were doing on LinkedIn. And I hadn't logged into LinkedIn like ever for like years. So when I logged in like January of 2022, it became a whole different thing. It became like a microblogging platform instead of like the resume platform. And then I started talking to a friend of mine, Lloyd Lobo, who was like really into this stuff. And he bootstrapped his company to 8 figures. And he's, oh yeah, you should follow this guy, Justin Welsh. Like he does a lot of stuff on LinkedIn. So then I started following Justin Welsh, and he's this raw, like solo entrepreneur that like writes on LinkedIn to build an audience. So then I took his course on how to use LinkedIn to build an audience. And it actually just made a lot of sense to me. So middle of 2020, which is just like a little over a year ago, I started to write on LinkedIn every day and then started like building an audience on there. But then at the same time, I started doing like podcast marketing. So like actively marketing myself on podcast as like an evergreen marketing channel. So since then I've been on like over 100 podcasts. And so just those two things together and then also investing in SEO. So I guess that's a long answer to saying what was my founding moment for LinkedIn. It was when I realized I ran out of leads and I needed a way to get my name, my personal name out there, but also my company name. And also what I realized from following other people on LinkedIn is people no longer just care about your company. They really care a lot about the person behind the company. And I think that shift has already happened in consumer products, right? Do you have a sustainable story? Who's the founder, right? Like for the first time, people aren't caring about the Gucci or like the Louis Vuitton, right? They're caring about the sustainable brand with the founders that came up with this while they were vacationing in Bali or whatever. And I think that shift is just happening for software. And nobody actually talks about their company. I never talk about my company. But you know that when you're there, you're a brand and people are curious about you and they do their own digging. So that I think is pretty interesting. And I think just a byproduct of forcing yourself to write. Like I've always loved writing. I'm just not a great writer. So it takes me a lot longer to get something out than like maybe someone who is a good writer. But I think through the process of forcing myself to write, I think it forces you to think about your business differently because you're just using a different part of your brain maybe. And then through that, I've gotten to meet other founders and other creators and people like you guys that are doing cool things. Right. So it's all just, I actually don't know if writing on LinkedIn has a direct impact on revenue, but I keep doing it because of all the other benefits that I'm getting. And it's really just building a supportive community while building this startup.
I think you've articulated it 1,000 times better than I can ever to Sean. And I've been preaching the same subject, right? I've been preaching the same thing is we have to be on there and you have to have a voice. Your personal brand is always greater than company brand. The company that may follow you is what you said. It's not something that you speak of, but people naturally get curious and they want to know about eWebinar. And I was the same. Melissa's constantly popping up my feed. Like I like some of the stuff she's talking about because she is really candid about experience. So that gets me curious and hence why I want to reach out. There is no other, but then you're building up this cool society and community and next minute I get to know about you and we're doing this thing. So I think that is powerful. To your point, I don't know how you actually then tie it to revenue, but I do want to go back to what you said earlier about PLG is that much harder than sales-led motion. That is not what a lot of the PLG companies will say because they fundamentally believe PLG is an easier path to success. You've not had the same experience, Melissa.
I think the grass is always greener on the other side. Just think about this, right? I think a lot of PLG companies, when they get big enough, they try to go out market, right? Like they turn product led into sales led because they have to, but only when they get to a certain size, right? Like when you look at like a Monday or Slack, right? Because you do hit a point, and we're talking about these massive companies, right? Like you do hit a point when maybe your revenue is stagnant and there's a lot of churn because of when your price point is low, you're also serving like SMBs, right? There is churn in SMBs. But when you're serving enterprise, there's very little churn, if any, right? Because they're investing a lot. They're going to be paying $100,000. So they're not just going to rip this out, right? Like you're really ingrained into their company at that point. But if you think about all these companies, I think you can have a very small company and still, I guess you can have, how do I say this? Like you can have a very small company and be sales led because each deal is really big. Like mine, right? Like my company only had 4 to 5 people at any given time, but we still got pretty close to $1 million ARR in a very short time. Right. While it took us a long time to find that product people will pay for, but once the first person paid for the product, it took us a year to break even.
Yeah.
Because every deal you just piece it together. Right now, if you look at eWebinar, every deal is $100 minimum. Right. So let's say anywhere from 1 to 200. Like that's the average. How many deals does it take to get to a million ARR?
Yeah.
And so it's just a different beast. And so a lot of these product-led companies have to raise money. I didn't raise money. I have some friends and family funding. I wrote the first check, but I didn't raise any real money. But you have to raise money to build a team in order to piece together as many deals as possible. But a lot of these PLG companies that get big enough, they have to go sales-led because they've run out of places to grow. The next place that they can grow to hit the growth numbers and the revenue numbers and maybe hit their IPO is to close bigger deals, right? And then they have to go and hire salespeople and all that. So I think there is a case to be made, right? To say this is harder or this is harder. But at the end of the day, like it just depends where your skill sets are as a company, right? But I do believe it is extremely difficult for a product-led company to grow without raising any money, including friends and family money, which we do have. But as a sales-led company, as an enterprise company, you can close one massive deal, have that be your only customer, right? And maybe you spring off into an agency and then use that agency to fund some other product, right? But it is extremely difficult to build a real product-led growth product without capital. And I think that's the difficulty.
For every one product-led growth company that you hear about that's Slack size, there's 50,000 of them that didn't get that big and had to raise a whole lot of money and then had to pivot and have some sales led. Like it is, and it's the same in sales. There's tons of challenges in doing that too. But I think, like you said, you got to go in eyes wide open. What skill sets does your company have? What price point are you selling at? Who is your target market? Do they buy? Which way do they actually consume their technology and where do they buy it? And I think the tips you gave around that are super important. It shouldn't be, what do you think the fastest way to do it is? How is your customer actually going to buy this stuff? That will lead you down the path.
Also, like for sales led, like you literally only just have to be a good salesperson. That's it. For a product led company, not only do you have to be a good salesperson to get the company off the ground, you need a marketer on your team, which we did not have, right? So SEO is probably a minimum of 50% of your traffic. It's a minimum of 50% of our traffic. We didn't know SEO. We spent so much money hiring agencies that didn't work because they couldn't take a company from 0 to 1. In the beginning, there's a lot of experimenting that you can't pay a company to experiment for you, right? I thought I could, but I couldn't. So then we actually paid an SEO agency to teach my COO how to do SEO. So luckily, he's a content guy and he's like naturally a curious learner and he loves that stuff and he was able to embrace it. So now we own our SEO. So for a PLG company, you need to be a great salesperson. You need to be a great marketer to know how to test new things. You need to have SEO chops, right? And you need to have capital. Whereas for a sales-led company, you only need to have a salesperson. I could spring up a sales-led company right now on my own, and I could probably make my first sale because I've just been doing it for so long. For a product-led company, you need a team of people. And the hardest person that you can't even hire because the best marketers are doing it for themselves is the SEO guy. And where are you going to find that person? Unless you are that person.
That is such a good tip. Man, like so many conversations we're having right now with the companies that are PLG led, or so they think they're PLG led. They miss this point that your marketing is beyond just digital marketing. It needs way more, to your point, Melissa. It needs to have this whole SEO engine behind you, and you need to have those people on team, but you can't find them. So therefore, you're going to have to move to the sales lead at some point in anyway. And if you've taken the capital, then why not move to sales lead? Can you see a reason if you're a PLG company, you've now raised capital, why would you not want to move to sales?
I can only answer for me, right? Because of lifestyle, right? I think a lot of people, when they think about business model and price point, they only think about revenue. For me, and I write about this a lot, revenue is second to lifestyle and happiness. I can make a lot of money right now if I go up market, but what would my life be like, right? Then I would have to hire a support team. I'd have to manage more people because people are paying me more. I have to be more front facing with customers. I have to take sales calls. I hated that life. So I didn't want that life. So I purposely keep my price point low. So when someone says, hey, I want to book a sales call, I say, I don't take calls. You can ask me through email, right? I don't care how big of a company you are. You want a call with me, whether it's sales or support, I'm going to say no, because that's my way of training the customer. Also, you're not paying me enough to get angry at me for not taking your call. And big companies know that, right? So why wouldn't you go sales led? Because I love the lifestyle that I have now, which is no sales call, no support call, small team, no custom features. This is what you get. So for me, business model and price point is lifestyle. And lifestyle trumps anything more than revenue. But for other companies, maybe that's not the case, right? Maybe other companies are like, I'm not gunning for the IPO, right? I'm not gunning for the unicorn exit. I would love to be a high revenue company, but I would not trade that at the cost of my life, which is I digital nomad. I'm always on a different time zone than my customers. Like I call all the shots. I don't set an alarm clock. Like I stay up till super late, right? I barely work on Fridays and I don't work Monday mornings. That's just a lifestyle that I've chosen. But I do also understand that for a lot of founders, they want to build a big business, right? They want the 9-figure exit. Like I just don't have that ambition. So I think that doesn't really get talked about enough, but maybe because other founders don't really think about it like me, right? Like other people
Super.
love conferences, right? They love live events and they love flying around for work. Like I've always hated that, but I do know
Me too.
like friends that love it.
Oh, is that? But I think your point is magical, right? When you get into business to build something, you need to understand the why. What are you trying to achieve? Why are you doing this? Do you want to be a unicorn? Do you want to have a balanced lifestyle? Do you want to work Fridays, not work Monday mornings? Like all of these things are super important into the reason you do it, because that's what gives you that energy and passion to do what you're doing, because you've built it around the life that you want to lead. And then you built a company that actually reflects what you're looking for, which I think is awesome. And I think you're right. Not enough people talk about the reason they're doing what they're doing. And
Yeah, like
kudos.
how does this, what I started with eWebinar, like I wrote a list of 10 non-negotiables I have to have before I even chose an idea. And some of those non-negotiables was like completely remote team, full team of contractors, have to be sold 100% through the internet, no live events, no sales calls. So I made a list of that and then I eliminated most of the ideas. And that's how I picked eWebinar. I didn't pick eWebinar and then come up with that lifestyle. And so I think a lot of people, and I did this in the beginning, and that's how I know that this is the wrong thing, is you go to school for a certain thing and you believe that your career has to be built on top of that. So I went to study law and I have to be a lawyer, and then I try to find happiness, and then they're miserable. Like, how can you believe that the expertise that you chose when you were 19 is what's going to make you happy for the rest of your life? Right. And that never really made sense to me. And I actually think that's why most people hate their jobs. Because then they think, now I have all this experience, I have to do this thing. But actually, the easiest thing to acquire is the skill set. So what you should actually start with is reverse. You should start with what makes you happy and then choose a career that makes you happy and then go and acquire the education and skill set for that. So I actually think the whole pyramid is like reversed. So after like living 10 years of just like low grade hating my job, because I did all the stuff in real estate. I went to SAP. So I thought, okay, if I were to start a technology company, maybe it should be in real estate and technology. So then I spent 10 years in real estate tech, but I like always hated my customers. And so yeah. And
Yeah.
then so like after the company was acquired, I was like, okay, let's start from scratch. What are the things that make me happy? So then I made a list of 10 non-negotiables, found a product that feeds that. And then I went to acquire the skills to make that successful. And I'm still like trying to learn the things that can make this successful, but it is a heck of a lot easier than trying to find happiness in my everyday life on weekends and evenings.
Love it.
Makes a ton of sense. Love it. Last question from me, Melissa. When you do decide to hang up your boots, what do you want to be known for?
When I finally what, sorry?
When you finally decide to go, this is not for me, like when you decide to retire or go into sailing into whatever you want to call it, what do you want to be known for?
That's a good question. Never really thought about that.
Dude, I like this question. We should ask to everyone.
Maybe
I guess I want to be known for, I guess I want to be known for the founder that advocates for lifestyle over revenue.
That is magical.
Yeah.
I'm going to do a little clip. I'm going to post it on LinkedIn, tag you and Sean on it this evening. It's amazing. We could probably talk to you a lot longer. I'm very mindful of your time. Do want to take you through a quick fire round though. We don't want to miss those. Every guest that pops on, we ask them the same question. So we start with an easy one first. Maybe it's the hardest for you, Melissa. What is your favorite place to visit?
That is the hardest one for me.
It's the best for digital moment. Yeah, what's your favorite place to go?
Like all of them. Everything's like good for a different reason.
It's a pick one.
No,
pick one.
This is just one.
You can pick one thing.
You can't
this is legit the hardest part of this thing.
I guess it would have to be Thailand. And I am in Bangkok currently.
Yeah.
But I am in Bangkok currently because Thailand has always been one of our favorite places to go to.
How good.
Done.
What about your favorite movie? Do you have one?
The Greatest Showman.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I think
it's got Australian in it.
Yeah. What about favorite music? What do you listen to?
I almost exclusively only listen to deep house music.
Yeah.
It's not hip hop, so I'm okay with it.
No.
That's pretty close, man. Pretty close.
It's like one of my least favorite.
Lo-fi, hip hop.
Hold on. Sorry, can you just repeat that last bit? What was one of your least favorites?
Hip hop.
Oh, thank you.
Did you notice, Sean? It wasn't me. It just froze. It just cut out. I couldn't quite hear that. What about favorite sports team? Do you have one, Melissa?
I do not. I do not watch any sports.
And that is absolutely fine. So we'll just
make one up. That's the favorite.
Yeah.
I'd have more friends, I think, if I did.
Yeah, you don't need to. Quality over quantity.
Yeah. You've already worked out lifestyle's more important. There's no point having friends just because they watch sport.
What about this one? Peanut butter. Crunchy or smooth? What do you lean towards?
Crunchy.
Definitely crunchy. There you go.
Answer that one for you. She's in Thailand.
It has to be like the organic one where the oil like splits.
Yeah, well,
not like the B one.
New Zealand's got some good ones. We'll send you a jar one. Melissa, thank you for coming on and thanks for sharing all your wisdom. This has been hugely valuable for me and I'm sure for anyone listening out there.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks, Heath.
Hey,